Every week on this joyful day, we gather around and we all say, it's time for the Game Dev Show, my friends, where the laughter never ends. With humor and wit, we share our tales of pixel art and coding fails. From bullet trees to funky sprites, we'll make you laugh with all our might. Join the Game Dev Jamboree, where creativity runs wild and free. From early builds to final release, we'll have you laughing like a feisty beast. So come on down, don't be shy. Grab a seat and enjoy the ride. The Game Dev Jamboree is the place to be, where laughter and games make our hearts sing with glee.
All right, welcome back to the Game Dev Show. It's hilarious. All right, so we're here again. I've got Story, Pal, Greg, and Andrew. We're going to talk about all of the topics that you probably saw in the title and a couple other things like that interesting new intro song that was put together. And which one of you was singing that?
A Story.
It's all you, Jason.
It didn't sound Irish to me. You know.
It sounded just like you.
When people sing, they lose their accent. That's the problem.
That's usually how it goes, I think. Usually I just sing with an accent. I should learn to sing with an Irish accent, just because it would be fun and really offensive. Anyway, you want to tell everybody how you made that? Looks like a couple people in chat already know.
Yeah, it was. Don't worry, people. It's not a new thing. It was just a single joke. We were kind of.
It is a new thing. What?
Okay, speak for yourself. Yeah, it was just we were playing around talking about some various AI stuff. I was having a chat with Corvallis a while ago, and this came up in chat because I think it was you, Greg, who first posted it. But yeah, somebody reminded me that this existed because it's been around for a while. But yeah, clearly the tech has kind of progressed a bit, and you can generate a few free things, and it's it's quite surprising how obviously it still sounds AI generated. The lyrics are weak, but yeah, it's surprisingly good as a kind of tech example. So yeah, Suno AI is the thing. It's good fun to play with.
Yeah, it seems interesting. It's funny. I was listening to a song at the kids' school today. I had to go to that award ceremony I mentioned. And they've got like a whole new school theme song that was way, way, way longer than I expected. And it was like 4-minute long song went on. But I wonder, like you could just generate those from AI. Start coming up with all these like random songs. And now I'm wondering if that one was made with AI. It was a long song. I mean, whatever. I'm used to the kid songs that are like, 2 phrases and then you're done and you clap and you go on to the next thing. So it makes the music and the songs then? Does it do like the lyrics and the singing and everything? Or how does that work?
Yeah. You type a description. Now you can tell if you play with it enough, you can start to spot some of how the tech works. For example, one of the ones my friend put in had themes of depression, so it didn't want to make that song. So it came back with, "I'm sorry you're feeling that way. Please contact someone for support and help." But because
so
the text portion came back with that, and the text gets sent to the song generator, very clearly it sung that to us, which is extra funny. It's so clearly it's a 2-phase process, right? So it effectively GPT is the query you give it to generate lyrics and sends the lyrics to the parser, which generates the song, and then it also generates a little thumbnail image for it as well. So I had a whole bunch of silly songs and there's little icon images of like potato with googly eyes, just various silly things. So it does the whole lot. It does album art, does the songs, does the audio and the whole lot as well. You just basically provide a genre. So
I posted some Magic Pig game theme songs to my Discord yesterday from it. And one thing I did, of course, the first thing I did was make some funny songs for my friends, and they won't let you use names. So if you put in your friend's name, even if your friend's name is just like Hector, they'll be like, we can't mimic or don't mimic of real musicians. I'm like, that's not a musician, that's just a name. But so their protections are very high right now, meaning they probably found that
even I caught the word "the" catches it out a lot. So for example, GameDevShow versus the GameDevShow means it implies GameDevShow is an entity that doesn't want to do work on a particular known entity versus a concept. So it's actually even more rigid than that.
Yeah.
I can't remember which generator I used, but I generated a poem when my daughter's dog it died. And so I made like an ode to Everett, which was the dog's name. It had no problem generating. And I think I even made a song about Everett. And I don't remember it calling out anything about not allowing names. Maybe that's a new thing.
Everyone will be different, right? They all have
Maybe it thought it was the city.
I would say you can probably get around it if you're sneaky. If you did say AX named Everett versus a song about Everett,
I did.
It's the difference between it saying make something up with this name versus about this thing name. So again, it's very subtle with language.
Yeah, it was about a schnoodle named Everett.
Yeah. Somebody said, I think, Story, you mentioned that you can put in, or somebody mentioned you might be able to put in your own lyrics.
Yep.
You can. There's a remix function as well for songs you generated to change it. Frustratingly, though, it's like all the other generative stuff. You can't have it reuse the same melody and swap the lyrics. It will do another regen, and so you'll often get even genre changes sometimes. So
yeah.
Still, it's still a toy. It's not really practical for anything.
You mean it's not going to destroy the recording industry? At least
not yet. No.
Yeah.
Although I will say, I found that I really enjoyed the sort of emo punk aesthetic soundtrack stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that falls into pop punk, Avril Lavigne style stuff, and it's all people, or Green Day or any of that, and having them sing really like angry, edgy, emotional songs about things like not being able to do the laundry is fantastically fun. Just ridiculous stuff. I had so much fun generating a whole sea of stuff about they forgot to add the fries to my order at McDonald's, and there's a big dramatic song and stuff. So yeah, just for fun. I definitely think it's probably not going to destroy any industries right now, but I legitimately laughed like with someone. Two of us are generating songs, and I've laughed louder during that than I have in pretty much anything for a long time.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds fun. It sounds like I've been wanting to make like a funny little game too, and it seems like an opportunity to kind of add that in, because that's always the part that I struggle with, is like the audio and sound for it to make it I feel like for something funny you have to have good audio and funny stuff like that. So I like it for that. I was curious though, any reason not to use some of that in YouTube videos, or does it like actually
I think they have a commercial
copyrighted stuff, and
I don't know.
You might
I'm not sure.
I mean, there's no reason why. There's no reason why you might accidentally make something that's already written, right? I mean, there's many combinations of notes, but especially with this AI, it's going to give you some pretty basic patterns, which I'm sure of all the AI generated things that they've made, there have been duplicates that are very similar, right? So you might still run into copyright issues.
So somebody might already have the GameDevShow song.
They might have the melody.
Well, okay, so this gets into a much more complicated conversation about, like, without denigrating the music industry as a whole, the truth of the matter is, if you actually study, I'm new to it. I'm bad at music. This isn't something I'm good at, but I'm looking into it as like my own research project. Once you start learning more about music production, you start to realize how formulaic and how structural a lot of that stuff is. Like, from the outside, it's a very creative field. And I'm not saying it isn't creative in areas, but broadly, music theory is theory. It's like almost anything else, like color theory, where there are fundamental structural rules, and there's chord progressions, and there's, things predominantly are in 4/4 time and Western stuff. So once you understand a lot of these rules, the short answer is, of course it will, because there's a lot of not only standards across music, but there's also standards per genre and standards per, different progression sets and how you would work. And then there's things like modes, and you move into the different types. It's like music theory in general basically can be very clinical if you really want it to be, and that's why these systems actually work quite well. So yeah, it will generate stuff. Right now it'll create very general and kindergarten type stuff, because it's, especially the lyrics, it's all very poetry that kind of it matches the expected next word, often doing horrible sins for music theory, like rhyming words with themselves, which you should really never do. But
or you don't want to rhyme words with themselves.
yeah, it's like, I think one of the songs generated lies, and then it rhymed it with lies. It's like, okay, cool. That's not a rhyme, but anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much, but I would say that you're going to get a lot of repetition. 100%.
Hey, wasn't it Ed Sheeran that was sued for, somebody's claimed they copied his song or something, and he took his guitar into court and played like 50 songs that had the exact same chord progression that they were claiming he ripped off or something.
There's a running joke in a lot of that musical stuff called 4-chord songs, and so there's like pop and rock ballads which traditionally have a similar chord progression because it's acoustically satisfying, and a lot of the Beatle music as well tends to have a certain set of repetitious. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
And you would also have to try to fight in court. This AI generator stole my song. It can only create the most basic of songs. Your song has to be so middle of the line for the AI to almost directly ape it that it's a very interesting world to live in where you have to fight above that threshold of mediocrity. Wherever the AI can generate, ideally whatever you make should aim above it. And if it doesn't, you probably shouldn't fight about it because it's a testament on your quality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, like,
when
to be
did
honest,
Jimmy?
unlike art, it's like with music stuffs particularly, you don't even need the AI generative stuff. The AI generative stuff is there to stitch things together, but it's not like you don't need to feed it a giant collection of songs. You just need to tell it chord progressions and some basic rules and systems. It's not quite the same. It's like giving it an array of pixels and colors. Like it doesn't work the same way. People can't really you're not going to find a giant database of music that's as ripped, as far as I understand. I could be wrong, but you don't need that level of technology to achieve the outcomes it's doing.
Hey, wasn't it Jimi Hendrix that said all you need is 3 chords and the truth?
I don't have the truth.
Yeah, he probably was. Because most famous artists also realize music has a fundamental formula to it. There are basic building blocks, but the trick of actually making good music is usually whatever additional content you can provide for it, making it thematically synergistic, kind of like with a story. Every concept and every building block and trope of a story has been done. There's the meme of all tropes have been done before, but it doesn't make them bad. Just put them together in a more interesting way. Your composition is a very big part in it.
Yeah. I don't think this AI music stuff, by the way, is going to destroy the music industry. That's just my take. I think musicians are still going to be musicians. There's still going to be creative folks who make better music. They're still going to be much better live performers than AI generated live performers. And I think there's going to be a huge market for AI generated music that these artists can benefit from, because if they are looking for the money, then I'm sure they will accept money every time somebody makes a variation of their song to be played at home, because I'm feeling an acoustic mood, but I want to be a Swiftie. So please play me acoustic Taylor Swift AI generated music, Alexa, and then Taylor Swift gets paid. So
yeah, I wonder if they'll have like some customizable service soon. It seems like an opportunity to have something where like you could have it, maybe not like a fully AI generated song, but where it's generating some parts and customizing a song for some specific person or event, and they just whatever, charge them $20 or $50 for the license to have that one song to play at their little party or whatever, or something like that. But
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it also is going to make it easier for the like beginner and new people to get in and do stuff, just like all of the advanced recording tech on laptops and stuff made it drastically easier, where you didn't all of a sudden need to have a studio. You just really need a good microphone and some skills. You don't necessarily need to have a band and then a studio after that, after things got down to electric, and now it's down to all digital. And now with AI, I feel like it might make it drastically easier. So
yeah, we're gonna get some really good content from humans who learned via AI. And people are gonna be mad, but people were mad when synths came out, and people were mad when digital everything comes out. But I'm pretty sure digital cameras did not destroy photography.
And I just realized that you made Taylor Swift pop up on my background. That's what was going on. I was like, what's going on? We're listening to Taylor Swift is now up on my background.
Well, because I said, Alexa, play Taylor Swift on repeat.
That is why. I don't know what you said. You said something like that, and Taylor Swift took over my space station.
Yeah, say her name 3 times, she shows up.
Well, to
our
kind of
fans
like
will show up, okay?
To what Corvallis was saying, like the truth is, again, like if you really want to be super clinical about the structure of it, you could say, okay, most Western music is in C. And if you're going to go and see, you need to pick what mode you're in. Certain modes emote differently. You're going to emote whether, if it's a video game, let's say we're making Zelda. Zelda is heroic. If you want to be heroic, you want to be in the Mixolydian mode. So it's going to be C Mixolydian. And then you're going to have chord progressions, which go up and down in an arc that implies a narrative structure that has the character feel like they're on a heroic journey. And so the point is, if you keep doing it, then you're going, okay, what instruments are used for this particular, which instruments evoke water, which instruments are used for sand regions. And then now you can generate a pretty realistic portrayal of the structural systems for the different kinds of music for those kinds of games. But again, to kind of circle back on what Andrew was saying, the fact is there's so much to learn that while you can generate that stuff, if you're trying to get something quote unquote good, there's a lot of information you need to know. And sometimes it's quite useful to be able to say, I don't know what I need to know music theory wise. And so maybe I can generate like themes and thematic pieces. I can ask it to analyze it and help me figure this stuff out. And you can come away with the knowledge of, oh, okay, that's how you do a chord progression, or that's how I move. If I want to move from one to the other, how do I get there by having bridging, chords and stuff? Like there's a lot of information to get through. So again, we talked about this before, but personally, I love using AI stuff as a informational tool. I often ask you questions about what are 4 ways I could approach the problem, or how could I do that? And I don't use it as much in work, but I definitely use it a lot to help myself understand entire fields of study.
It's a great hobbyist skill accelerator because it automates so much of the process of learning a particular field into.
Yes.
I can ask hyper specific questions. If you know what you need, it goes very fast, and it can give you context for what your unknowns are in a particular field, where you can start building out guiding pathways. It's just great for self-teaching and information, as long as you understand the proper principles of learning and you're interested in going deeper, and not just AI give me image, bam, I'm now an artist.
Yeah.
Eat out of it you put in, literally.
I completely agree. It's one of the things that freaks me out about me teaching on YouTube. Like, it seems like ChatGPT is so good, and it's just getting better. And Writer's tool is just freaking amazing at it too, for just giving you insight into the coding side of things. But I found it for ChatGPT, kind of like you said, great for all of the things that are not code related too, that I'm trying to figure out, which is a lot of random things throughout the day. It's usually like my default of the place to go now to ask questions. It's just got to be bad for Google too. I can see.
Did try Bard though.
Does eat Google's lunch?
You
Bard is good too.
Bard because ChatGPT's been really slow for me, and it worked well for me.
Yeah, Bard's pretty good, as long as you don't mind the ads, but they don't really bother me too much. I like the Writer one the best though for code stuff. I'm curious. One last thing on the music stuff that I'm wondering about, and see what you guys all think, and maybe what everybody in chat thinks. But do you think that there's an opportunity, or maybe there already is a tool like this out there, that for something that just kind of generates music based on the mood, kind of like you were saying, but you just do it dynamically at runtime, and could just be like some runtime, or maybe it's like maybe I'm thinking like, is there like an opportunity for some asset or tool or something that deals with music throughout the game, and you're just feeding it a couple variables for like the mood? Maybe there's like 4 sliders or whatever that you're giving it for like intensity and calmness versus whatever other things, hot and cold, or and you're giving it that, and it just kind of generates stuff. Do you think that there's an opportunity for something like that, or do you think that would be
definitely
really useful?
So the thing that's slightly more fancy about Suno relative to some of the others, because there's already like video game music generators, and what they do is they aim for more of a vertical integration concept. So for music development, vertical integration means that you turn on or off layers. You basically fade in and fade out different structural layers. And so if you did want to have that, what you're describing, the truth is you would just have a drum track, you just have a bass line, you would then have a melody generator that keeps it within a certain, up and down relative to the never move more than X number of chord projections up and down. And then you would just iterate through that. And as you would generate more, as I said, you can kind of get in again, music theory stuff, but like you can literally play the exact same thing. But like, if you understand the steps to move relative in terms of mode shifting, you can like make it sadder or make it happier. So the actual musical structure. That's why there's lots of YouTube channels that do like sad song happy or happy song sad, because if you understand music theory, that's actually not that hard to do. It's hard to riff and make it, melodic in interesting ways, but the actual just structural movement of them isn't. So that already exists. The problem is it's often very clinical. And even though you can't really tell, like initially, if you listen for long enough, you'll be like, okay, yeah, this is just like a standard 4/4. Like, there's absolutely nothing moving. There's no syncopation. There's nothing, like, it's just boring flat music. So it does exist, but I do think that personally, I hate that. For all my talk about the fun of this kind of musical stuff, the parts that I enjoy is there's again, I've said this story before, but to me this summarizes the whole thing. I watched a video of music theorists listening to music they would never listen to for the first time. So, for example, they have like classical rock musicians listening to video game music that they'd have no real cause to have heard before. And in one case, I heard somebody listen to a song from Undertale, and they honestly look like someone who would have never even heard of what Undertale was. And they're listening to the song, and they're describing, oh, I can hear this feels dramatic and interesting, and then there's conflict, and then the conflict but there's an emotional sadness here. And they basically describe the entire narrative arc of the two characters fighting without ever having played or seen the game, because someone who knows the audio is using leitmotifs for both characters. They're embedding the emotional arcs of the story. And the point is, no generator is going to do that for you. Again, maybe someday in the future, ... whatever. But structurally speaking, even today, if I'm working on a project, and by the way, if anyone does make music, feel free to hit me up. I have people I want to talk to with music stuff. They're like, you're not going to replace it with AI. So while it's fun to play with, I think video game music in particular is something that if you want to dynamically reacting to what you're doing and building a story, you're going to want to structure that yourself.
Mechanically, it's possible, but the actual design and flavor of that music, giving it the enriching properties of what an OST should be, matching to the emotion and the mood of whatever's happening in terms of gameplay, usually requires that design intent, that actual human hand over it. And the AI is likely not there yet, unless you went through an insane Rube Goldberg machine to try to program this in. But then at that point, you should have just written the music or composed it yourself, because you obviously need to know how to compose it in order to make the AI do it. And then we're at a race condition where it would just be easier for you to just compose the track and have those variations than try to force the procedural tracks to do it.
Now that being said, it's even easier than that. If you hire someone who doesn't care about music, the truth is there's a lot of genre trends. Like, literally, if you go to learn right now, if you're like, find FL Studio tutorials, how to make your first music in video games, especially like for your own games, you're almost guaranteed to get people starting by teaching you making small town village fantasy game songs, because they are so predictable. They are so easy to make, and they're basically just plinked piano on like increments across a very vague set of instrumentals. And so that kind of stuff is very, very easy, to the point where you don't even need to go the AI generative route. You can just have somebody, sneeze vaguely in the direction of a keyboard, and they can generate something which sounds pleasant. But again, we all know what that sounds like, the MMO backlog music, where someone just has a sea of the identical sounding dramatic fantasy fight, or the dramatic, small town forest. Like, there's nothing compelling about that. And it can be so unintuitive that it actually is counter to it. Like, I personally, sometimes I'm taken out of the experience, because I'm like, this is the most generic running across a field music I've ever heard in my life. It's actually annoying me.
I feel like you're upsetting dozens of MMO music composers right now.
Good.
All 12 of them. They do, like, I know, like, I've talked to some, and I know, like, they get really into it, and they really, they'll like the actual, like, composers on the AAA games, and they're really into it, and they put a lot of work in a lot of the things that you were saying, with making things match up. But it's also a very difficult job, because they're like usually just pushed off to the side, and then things change, and they don't even find out about them until after it went live and stuff, like that kind of stuff. But I do think that there's one other really good benefit of this too, which is just for all the people that weren't gonna have unique sound in it, and we're going to just have to grab something from one of the few assets that are out there available. I know, like, every time I've made a game, pretty much every time I've just bought music, because I'm not going to create music. I'm not good at it, and I don't know anybody who's going to. I don't have a huge budget for it, so I just go buy, a pack for $100 that's got all the songs in it. And I feel like this will make it so that people can do kind of the same, but have a little bit more variation. Not everybody's playing the exact same song. Probably bad for those music composers and publishers that have been doing this kind of thing. I mean, I feel like it's a negative impact for them. But Andrew, what's up?
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't see any value for a game developer to use this in anything other than prototyping.
For background music?
Background music, yeah. So first of all, we all know many songs from Zelda or Super Mario Brothers or Skyrim, and the music makes a game, right? And you need copyright of that. You need to control that. As a developer, you need to control the sound of the game. It's different from bullet sounds. It's different from we remember those things. And so if something is generated automatically, especially at runtime, you're not going to get that memorable sound. You're not going to get people humming that sound, people riffing on it on YouTube, etc. Right?
I was thinking more pre-generated. So like I could go in there and be like, I need fantasy songs, play through hundreds of generated ones until I find the thing that I like. You know, that kind of thing.
I mean, you could do that. And maybe fast forward 5-10 years and we'll get AI generated songs that sound just as good as any Nintendo stuff. But you still are going to need copyright on it. And there's going to be massive issues with the copyright on music. I think more than image generations, the music industry is going to fight tooth and nail on whether an AI system can copyright. And somebody mentioned in the chat the TED Talk where somebody essentially published every chord progression you could possibly do. That hundreds of thousands, if not more, millions of progressions. Just to make a point, like, listen, just because you put this out there doesn't mean you own it. But the reality is, if anyone can just make anything, then you don't own that copyright because somebody else can make the exact same thing accidentally, and it makes it a weird world. I don't know. So I think in the end, it's not going to be the best move for a game developer, at least, to use pre-generated or randomly generated AI music in their project, at least until we change our entire foundational thing around music. Because the memorability of the music, you know, the control of it, all that stuff. What
about sound effects?
Sound effects are a little different. I think
creaking doors and that kind of stuff.
I would say for music, the one thing where I might disagree with myself here is in ambient music, right? So ambience, like in the world where you're in a dungeon, there's no music. There's just kind of ambient notes, not melody, just notes. That could be completely AI generated, and I don't think anyone would give a shit, you know. And I know Skyrim, they have the Skyrim atmospheres, you know, where a lot of it's just birds making sound. So that type of stuff, fully AI generated, that's perfectly fine. That breaks up the monotony. It can also react to the game, so you could now have a system that when you want the player to start feeling anxiety, even though they don't realize there's a big boss coming up, you can have that little bring up the anxiety a little bit, and the players won't know. That is a perfect use case. But for the hero songs, for the actual melodies, I would personally stick away with it. Instead, just buy music from.
It's also just worth noting too, because we've talked before about how people often don't understand the complexities of a field. So they look at game dev and don't realize that there's game designers and level designers and software developers and tool developers and whatever. Music is obviously just as complicated. And so when we're talking about this, even if we do say you could generate X, Y, or Z, there's a difference between good masterers and good mixers and people who are good at producing, or like literally people who are good at playing certain instruments. And so even if we do go down that road, just because you can generate a bass line doesn't mean the same thing as having, you still might want to pay a very good mixer to make that music actually work for you, and to fill out the space properly and to give it depth. And there's a lot more to it. So yeah, I'm kind of in Andrew's camp on that. Is that like sound effects? I'm willing to completely write off the sound effect stuff. I don't mean to offend any Foley artists out there, but I do think Foley more than anything else is simply because Foley is a lot of work for something that realistically doesn't have to be a lot of work. Like a lot of Foley is very I'm going to get into a whole big separate conversation here, but the thing about Foley that's different from music is Foley is a lot more personal. There are libraries that people tend to use, but libraries are expensive. They're like multi-$1,000 for like things that are unique sounds you'll never get, like people going off to rainforests and doing stuff. If you're doing your own game, most Foley is someone buying a recorder and then just stepping on leaves, or like testing different materials in their house and tapping surfaces. And so a lot of it is built up, and the skill of that isn't the recording per se. It's often more about the mastering of it and putting things together and layering it correctly and so on. And so if you get to a world where the part where you have to go and find a uniquely metal sound that you touch one surface off another, if you can generate those things, cool. That's why a lot of synth music is often using different sound wave generators, right? Like, I think we can cut that part out, but the skill is still required. It's just the creative portion of composing layers. And it's why movie sound effects of car engines often have a tiger growl in the sound if you're listening, because that beefs it up in a way that psychologically implies, and so on, right? So I think I'm not saying the job
Prius sounds like a muscle car when it starts
yeah,
up.
exactly. Right? So,
There's something Andrew said where this kind of music is only best in the prototyping stage. That's actually not only very true, but there's a very a funny side effect that happens, and this is true in film. So I think it was for Avengers that was used as the example. A lot of movie composition artists use basically beta tracks where they create something that generally has the feel or the vibe for the particular scene, and they insert that in while they continue to do the editing and build up the scene. A very common issue with beta tracks is because it'll stay with the prototype footage for so long, and that'll be the first pass usually given to like directors and producers, that they'll say, oh cool, that's awesome music, we're going to keep it. But the composer's like, wait, but no, that was just meant to be placeholder. It does nothing. I've not actually put in any of the work for it. But everyone gets attached to the beta music because it's been in for so long that, okay, now we're going with beta music for this scene. I just add like another layer of progression on top of it. And as a result, I don't get to innovate. The very first pass or the first draft of music gets put in. And it hurts a lot of movie soundtracks because they end up feeling samey and generic because the directors went with the first pass, even though they weren't supposed to. So for how this relates to like AI game music, a lot of people might end up still agreeing or enjoying with their prototype music just because you start to get attached to it, and then they just don't end up moving off of it. It's great for like that initial supplementation, but you do hurt yourself long term because you could have composed something more in depth. You could have gone deeper into what this music can do and developed it out further, but your first draft was just good enough. And especially like a AAA company where now there are multiple hands that have to pass off on this. If you leave that track in too long and the director or producer is just like, okay, that's good enough, just like run with it, you are now locked in to literally your first draft.
Yeah, I've literally seen. I take courses on everything. I like learning random stuff, and I took like a 200-hour course on video editing and like how people approach different solutions. And one of them was editing for film. And one of the advice they gave in that it stuck with me was if you have a separate director that you're working with, do not put a cut of test music in that's known. Like you can do, it's called needle drops. It's going to the whole thing. It's one thing to put in temp music that's very bland or background, but if you put in music that's a known quantity, people will associate that with the shot, and you will end up like they will associate that, and it'll feel wrong when you switch other things out. So they often propose to provide silent music sections to a director and ask them to explain what they want it to feel like, and then go away and get the music and bring something in that's separate, because it will, as you said, it gets locked in, and then people end up getting stuck with stuff that nobody actually really wants, but it's so psychologically comfortable at a certain stage that it's very hard to remove.
It's interesting. It's just like code when you put up your prototype project and send it to the manager and they go, oh, good, it works. All right, let's ship this out tomorrow just to add a couple more buttons. Yeah, I've seen it with art and music and all kinds of stuff too, though. It's definitely a big problem. We had a lot of topics I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if you guys want to jump into one of those, or I'm also curious about like this AI stuff, though, the voice acting and how you guys all feel about that. But because I feel like that's another spot where I think it's super, super, super useful. It really sucks for voice actors, but it's, I think, a huge boom for game developers in general, because nobody gives a shit like who reads the voice off with the accent. They just care that there's the thing, and you've been able to edit and modify voices forever. It's just getting drastically easier. It's terrible for voice actors, but huge for
I think there might be opportunity there for them, though, to offer up their voice to train AI. Like, you know,
I feel like it's a loss for Corvallis, though. Like, he had the opportunity as a radio host, and now radio's dying, and They'll be able to generate his voice soon. It's
Hey, that's why we went to YouTube. Okay, I'm already ahead of it. I have my own voice clone. You really need for my license.
Isn't even if you change the voice, it's the inflections, the actor aspect of the voice actor that is more valuable than the voice itself.
Yeah, I mean, good luck totally reproducing Matthew Mercer in the way he delivers his lines.
Yeah. All those little nuances that an actor will pick up on how to deliver a line, how to read something, that's not going to be less valuable. So I think it does enable voice actors to be able to modify their voice in ways that they couldn't do it before and still have the actor aspect to get somebody who's willing to pay. They're not willing to pay for crap. They're willing to pay for the very best, and they're willing to pay that premium for that 5% better, you know?
Yeah.
And then eventually the names. I mean, how many animated movies just hire name brand actors just because they want their names in the poster? So that I don't think
I'm waiting for the movie where it's just nothing but Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt is every voice character somehow. We've just used AI and we made it work. Okay, it's just Chris Pratt talking to himself.
And then with AI, it could be Chris Pratt's voice being changed. It's like Eddie Murphy in all of his movies where he plays every character.
So it looks like they had an agreement with Replica now.
I heard about this.
That's interesting. I have to talk to them about that. So some new agreement for voice acting.
Actually, I have to read into
Interesting. Yeah, I could see it. Like, I don't think it's great for like every game and every character, obviously, but I think for all the like background characters and stuff, where a lot of the time it was like me going to get a friend to go try to record something and get him to say it so I could have multiple different voices, and we'd do that. Or like having to force designers to go into an office and record something that they don't want to say just because you need a unique voice. I think this is great for all of that stuff, all those generic NPCs that weren't going to be the things that people cared about. If you want to have voiceovers like we did with EverQuest 2, like they spent, I think there's $30 or $50 million on voiceovers for that, and then had to stop because it was just, you can't go in and update it and stuff afterwards. And 90% of the voices were just like, generic dock worker or whatever. It wasn't like these heroic epic things like with League of Legends.
I understand that if you're going, again, MMO, large numbers, ... sure.
Or like RPG in general for non-core characters, your shopkeepers and all that shit.
Sure. I will say, fine, I get it. But the thing is, right, I like to be practical and say, of all the voice acting roles in all the world, how many of them are that job versus how many of them are most games usually we're talking about fewer characters and fewer things. Right? There's not every game is going to have 500 individually voiced dramatic characters, right?
No, but most of them are going to have something from like Fiverr, right? Most of them aren't going to have a professional voice actor. Most are going to have, somebody in the studio doing it or somebody cheap.
I agree, but I guess the point I want to get to is just the fact that, again, I like looking at voice acting. I like to know what the job is. So I watched a bunch of videos on that topic too. And the running theme is that voice acting is acting. That's like the takeaway. The voice portion is what your mouth does. It's how your vocal cords work.
Your
the
mode
acting,
of acting.
what you're paying for. Yeah. And so I posted a little video. It's an Omeletto short movie that I think summed this up better. I recommend everyone watch it. It's very funny. It's kind of the plight of being a poor voice actor working for people and them not really knowing what they want. It's a fun little story, but I think the narrative takeaway should be watching something like that is what you're paying for. And I think, yes, arguably, if you're somebody who's like, I cannot convince a female family member to do this for me, so I need to go and pay someone, sure, you're at the stage your project probably doesn't have the cachet of whatever it is that you need to produce that. But the thing is, like, I really cannot express enough how acting is hard. Anybody who's ever tried to do any form of acting, voice or otherwise, it is very hard to sound natural. And voice acting, people who don't naturally voice act sound even worse than them acting on camera, weirdly enough, because when you try to act and you're not a voice actor to a microphone, you have stilted body language. But if you watch a lot of professional voice actors, they will act. Even though no one's seeing them, they will emote, they will puff their chest, they will lean in and lean out, they will use all of the natural intonations that'll work for how your stuff works. And it's like, it fundamentally changes the performance. Like they will emotionally engage with the content in a way that no amount of like, hello, welcome to my shop, straight line reads are going to do. And again, you can argue where, like, I don't think it's a question of voice acting, good or good or bad or cost or whatever. The fact of the matter is, it comes down to, I agree, there's certain parts of your game you'll have to cut costs. Is it going to be in custom music? Is it going to be in voice acting? ... Where is it? But my answer would be, if you are making a game which has characters in it, why do you have characters? Because you want the player to interact with the characters. If you want to interact with the characters, how do you want them to feel about the characters? Do you want them to feel like they are glorified machine buttons you press to get supplies out of? Then fine, go nuts, have your generated voice actors. If you actually want players to care about the world, they have to care about the people in the world, they have to care about the characters, they have to care about the voice acting. And so, in my opinion, world building is one of the things you should least cut costs on. And to do that best, it's going to be in things like the music. It'll be things like the voice acting. Because that's the thing, that, as per Andrew said earlier, that's what people remember. That's the stuff that sticks with people. That's
but let's take a non-RPG, like an RTS, right? I'm building an RTS. I need voices for my different units. They just have to be military-ish units. They're obviously, the voice acting is not the key part. There might be some fun, funny, interesting, cute lines, but it's never been like, I've never seen an RTS where like it was the voice acting was the thing. It was the funny quotes and stuff.
I will say it's for Command and Conquer, because my brother loves that series. He took me
same here. My favorite. 0 Hour is the best RTS ever made.
Those lines are so fun and so funny. Yeah, there's a level of cheesy B-movie acting on top of the exaggeration that just makes that game for the experience. Like Command & Conquer is a great example of you're tweaking a already like fun game. The voice acting's elevating it. You can, like for all aspects of a game, choose to cut corners on areas where I just need this to be done and I just need this to be procedural. And that's like a one-man studio. You might want, I don't really care about the music part of my game. I want other parts to be focused, but it is ultimately like a corner cut. So where it's feasible, it's great. But if you do take the time, and you do take the time to do it well, which usually means some level of like handcrafting, you can elevate what was already like good or okay to great and infinitely memorable. Like, I need some shoes, that fucking line every time. You can upgrade him and give him the shoes too. That's just such a nice connector.
It's interesting because that's like, I think what Jason Weimann was getting at to me was, okay, you've got a world and you don't know what people are going to say versus where you know what people are going to say and you want them to be memorable, and sometimes I think like the job's done or even the shoes accidents, like those weren't intended to be memorable. Yeah. Happened to be so repetitive. And so they just hit the nail on the head that people are like, that's hilarious. That's funny. But then in a world where you have dynamically created dialogue, even if it's within guardrails, you're not going to you can't do a voiceover. You can't record that no matter how you slice it. So you've got to perhaps put some guardrails, and maybe the AI is not going to create the entire inflection. Maybe you have to create some inflections or something. I don't know whatever, but there is going to be a world where, an AI generated voice with AI generated emotions are going to be valuable, because you don't know if this NPC is going to be mad at you or sad or whatever, because they themselves are generated based on the AI dynamics, right?
Which actually brings up a completely other but very valid point, which is if you look at documentaries that study the background of game audio, and specifically that problem of even like hiring quote unquote real voice actors, a lot of the times people complain about dubs or translations where it sounds garbage, and they're like, why is it so bad? And like, oftentimes these are professional voice actors who in their own language sound great. And what people don't realize, the reason this often sucks is not through lack of talent. It's because what happens is someone has been given 12 pages of lines of text and said, read these. And you're like, where am I? Who am I? What is the emotional context I'm talking in? They're like, read the lines, which is how you get that Resident Evil style stuff of people scared for their life sounding like they're ordering coffee, right? Because the people fully underestimate the value of that extra context.
You didn't read the excited tag in brackets?
So that's why, like, I think, yes, there is an argument to be made that in a world where you can't always know all of that information, having a trained, especially if it's a trained model on a voice of a person, you can have their ideas of certain takes. And while it's not as good as having them read lines specifically, you will have a better chance than having someone trying to, okay, this conversation could happen in any one of 17 different ways. You could have killed their brother. You could have been married their, into the family. How does this person feel about you? And every single line intonation would be vastly different based on the emotional subtext of the context. Or you can bake all of that into your training model and have some sort of structural thing out of it. So there is cases where it might actually even be better. I just think they're few and far between.
Yeah. So it comes down to the use case and what you want out of it.
Well, I think we should probably move on to one of these other topics. And I was curious what you guys want to talk about. Let's see what everybody in chat says too. You guys want to go into...
I'll put one last bullet point on that, because I think this is the most important thing of that whole conversation, is because someone made a very good point, which said that it's like a deal breaker for them. Well, here's anyone who's ever done video editing of any kind. This is a universal truth. You can have garbage video, good audio, and it's fine. But if you have garbage audio, it doesn't matter if it's 4K or 8K or perfect video, nobody will watch your stuff.
And even great YouTubers, I see it sometimes. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to watch this.
So what people like, I really can't stress this enough. Sure, AI voices, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I know it's not just me. If I hear really bad AI voices where it's robotic monotone, I won't play the game. I can't. I just can't bring myself to engage with this horrible level of line reads. So there's a line between using stuff that's good enough. But if your replacement is just to use AI voices that are just for the sake of AI voices to have some voice acting, you're better with none. So like playtest with people and find that breaking point. Because if you haven't hit it, if you're under that sort of feeling of it, like this is actually grating to hear, people will drop your game the minute they hear one line of AI dialogue if it feels like AI dialogue. So again, it can be a deal breaker. I'd just be... Audio is like the thing. Video is important, but audio is way more important to how people experience content. So don't mess with that too much.
Just have your game start on mute, so that way nobody notices. I play every game on mute anyway. Like I've noticed that like 9 out of 10 times I'm on mute. Like I'll play with audio on for a few minutes, and I'm like, all right, that's enough of that, and then turn it down, and I've got like a YouTube video playing right next to me. So it happens to me constantly, or I'm talking to somebody. But all right, let's go on. So do we want to go on to the AI generated game Palworld? No, just kidding. Or the Apple news. I'm curious, what do you guys think is most interesting this week?
Here's a good question. Who here in this room has not played Palworld?
I actually played it last night, so I've checked that box off.
So I think everybody has played it.
Yeah, I played today video day.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
I played it long enough to where it got to be night, and I didn't have a way to stay warm, and I started freezing to death.
You got to pull out your torch or build a campfire. I died. I froze to death multiple times too, because I'd get distracted, walk away, and come back, and I was frozen to death. I'm like, oh yeah, or killed by something. I certainly died constantly, but I did have a lot of fun with it. And I only got to play for a really short time so far.
Well here's my main problem. I could see totally getting sucked into it and losing months of my life.
Well, so far I had 57 hours. So yeah, it's worked for me on that front. Yeah, it's gotten to the point that I've whenever any game you play that's got a long structure, you end up playing multiple times with people and restarting. So it's gotten to the part now where I've repeated the opening like 20 levels like 6 different times, and so I can speed run now and get really far very fast, and so that's fun.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. What do you guys think has made it so popular? Is it just the fact that it's Pokemon with guns, or that it's Pokemon like characters online, or is there more that you think is really setting it aside and making it a big phenomenon?
There were a couple good components. One, so I can like speak to my experience. One part is I had a good marketing team. They gave it specific early access to different kinds of people to ensure maximum like community penetration. So I saw it or gameplay for it a couple days before it came out, and because I saw that and I'm like, oh hey, that was like a fun game, I might actually give it a try. It released not at $60, at like a nice price point, early access, and they dropped it for an early discount. So if you bought it like day one, it was even 10% off from there. It creates a very good value offer for, hey, here's that fun thing you just saw. Oh, it just came out and it's on sale. All of those nice hits for a solid release plan. And then from there, it's got a lot of fun things for it. It's a fun sandbox. I got that novel concept of literally Pokemon with guns. And there are certain bits about that game that seem to be a kind of a smorgasbord of ideas and mechanics that make it an entertaining experience. I won't lie, the thought of getting Pokemon and putting them to work in a sweatshop factory is so hilarious on its face that's what made me buy it instantly. And then from there, there's plenty of actually good gameplay and design decisions to
and that's it.
Its marketing was great.
You have to split it into two things. Why did it gain like overnight sort of notoriety, and then why is people still playing it? Because they're two vastly different things. It's one thing to get a lot of people to play your game. It's another thing to get a lot of people to keep playing your game. And so the first half is, I think, a perfect storm. I think if Nintendo hadn't dropped the ball and multiple Pokemon games in a row sucking, it wouldn't be as popular. If it wasn't already a gimmick that Pokemon with guns, but also just the fact that Pokemon as a franchise has been moving more and more away from anything in their own narrative that's edgy. I always go back to, in the first game, you had a rival and like there was an evil corporation. By later games, it's everyone's happy, there's schools and friends. It's like, that's not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that if that's your narrative structure, people who grew up with the slightly more, I'm actively doing this despite my horrible rival that I hate, those people are missing that vibe of what they used to play.
Small pinpoint. Team Rocket was a gang organization that controlled the whole island. Giovanni was the mob boss and also a gym leader. It was just in control of everything, and they were just harassing people. We do not get anything anywhere near as bad or as the world is actually kind of messed up as that. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it's a lot of that factors, which basically that's a perfect storm to go, I need to try this out. And finally, there's just like 5 or 6 blatant meme moments that everyone is going to hit when they first play it. Things that you could never do in Pokemon, like killing something as you're trying to capture it, or capturing a human and figuring out what, if that works or not. All of these different things, you're going to try those out for the first time. The first time you see a monkey with a machine gun, like these little moments are very funny and they make for great memes and gifs that travel it. Now, the second half of that is the important part, I think, because that gets people in the door. That gets you all the news, all the press, which gets more attention. The part that matters to me, and the reason I think it's successful, is because it is not Pokemon with guns. Hot take. It's not actually that at all. One, the guns start around level 30. You have to be playing for 20 plus hours before you even begin the gun concept of the game. That's great for marketing material. It's not actually relevant to the core game loop. And 2, what's way more important, it's not Pokemon, it's Satisfactory. It plays exactly like Satisfactory. It is an exploration game with resource collecting, and that's the core loop of your game 99% of the time. You're basically doing a very lightweight version of a crafting survival game. So it's complicated enough to have deep mechanics to play. It's simple enough to be approachable for people who don't play more complicated building games, which have a lot of mechanics. And so it's the perfect example of I can run around, I can hit stuff, and there's cool stuff to look at, and it's got the nostalgia factors for Pokemon. So the short answer is it's successful because the gimmick sounds good. It's a match of a good point in time for marketing. And then the gameplay itself is an approachable genre with just enough depth to pull people along and enough visual intrigue with the concept to keep you playing and like wanting to share with people, and the emotional investment that looks great for, doing Twitch streams and things. So I think it's just like, it really is hit this combination of things which work really well.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, another like great success factor, opening with multiplayer is massively increase its initial and like continual longevity, because now you can play with other people. Palworld would be fun if it was single player, but its lifespan would immediately be far shorter because after you've done one run, you're not super incentivized to do it again. But even though I'm a little annoyed by the fact you have to start a new character, because you have to, and you're likely going to play with other people, it will extend your playtime and you will get more and more invested in those early games. And they give a nice variety for the early games too. You can choose where you want to start and spice up that initial startup process. And that's what a lot of people find to be the most fun, is that early survival night running around crafting campfires and having to hit your friends with sticks in order to make them your friends.
Speaking of that, if you want to learn how to make multiplayer games, sign up for the multiplayer mastery course. There's a link in the description. The next call is actually Monday, not Sunday. That time is incorrect. That's from our last week. Yeah, check that out though. Go build your own Palworld. Or something similar. I don't know. I feel this heavy motivation to make a fun little multiplayer game that everybody will enjoy and have fun with. I just need to find like a way to stick myself in a time machine for a year and then come back out and have it be the same day, so I can go do the whole thing and build it all with everything else going on. But I feel really motivated playing that, and just running through and having so much fun with it. And I think you were dead on story with the accessibility part, especially. So I've tried a lot of crafting survival games, and I just can't. I struggle to get into them because there's a lot of things that you have to go build and a lot of time sinks and complexity. And I'm like, I can't spend this much time with it. Palworld was the opposite. I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty fucking straightforward. I can figure out what to build, how to build it, where it goes, and other than me freezing to death, so I'm doing all right.
You also can't deny, even just the little aesthetic differences are quite nice. The fact is, when you run across a field area and you're basically picking up literal rocks and sticks, like every single survival crafting game in the world, there's not much to look at other than occasionally a stone building of some kind. In this, you're running through your base, which has various Pokemon doing jobs, which is kind of fun to see. Even just from a visual aesthetic perspective of deploying new creatures to your base and watching the dragon use fire to cook things. It's that's a cool, it makes the whole just the same trope mechanics actually a little bit more visually fun, you know?
And we're just running through the wild. You get to see little cats doing yoga, or birds swoop down and eat a core. The natural ecosystem of the pals interacting really adds to a lot of the variety of I can go to a new environment. It feels like there are cool wild animals and dynamics that get to engage with each other.
I had a lot of fun just seeing random new enemies too and stuff pop up and then come up and kill me while I was fighting stuff, fighting these little things. And then
it's just a mercenary squad of guys with guns, and I hear them clacking menacingly in the distance.
And the thing is too, is people may not realize it, because the very first complaint I had when I saw it is I personally absolutely despise the aesthetic of realistic terrain with cartoon characters. I hate that combination. I think it's lazy. I think it's ugly. Sonic Frontiers did it as well. I'm not a fan. I got over it in this, but normally that's a deal breaker for me, and I'm just not a fan of that style. But one thing I will say to its credit is it looks procedural. It's not procedural. It's like Subnautica, where people thought it was seed-based generation. It isn't. It's a manually placed world. And that's very apparent once you start playing, because it actually is very well paced and balanced in terms of locations you start, in terms of the kinds of things you find, and the sort of slow peppering of new content in that there's biomes and regions. There's pros and cons. The game is far from perfect. There's lots of stuff I complain about. But there is one thing that I will say that I think is probably the most important part of the whole lot, which is mechanically, games like this often have a power creep process where if you think about a Pokemon style game, if you capture something more powerful, why would you ever use the weaker stuff or engage with the weaker stuff? That's pointless. And so what this game does mechanically, which really makes that more useful, is each different creature has different benefits to your base relative to the skills it can perform. So there's benefits narrative that to structure it for using for your base or for combat for separate different roles. And its leveling up structure incentivizes bulk capture of smaller creatures. So if you enter a new area and they're all low level, there's still, and actually there's more benefit conceptually with leveling system to capture low level stuff. And so unlike structured games where Pokemon, you capture your top 3 and then you just run through the game, you don't need to really capture anything else. In this game, you actually can't progress very far unless you're engaging with bulk capturing stuff for multiple level purposes. So when you see a new area, there's actually benefits even capturing weaker stuff. And so my point is all of the systems interplay in a way that no individual loop is left in the rain. There's base building, there's character building, there's exploration, and it all flows in a way that's very systemically well structured.
All right, I think Greg's got to drop out, so I'm going to say a quick goodbye and make sure that everybody goes to check out Highland Panic. If you haven't grabbed it already on Steam, go check it out, watch the videos on how it was built, and leave a positive thumbs up review and a couple thumbs up on the videos. Thanks again, Greg, for coming out. I assume we'll hopefully see you next week.
Yep. Thanks, man.
All right.
Have a good one.
Great.
Oh, all right. Oh, I got to move you over here somewhere, Jason. You can't be looking off at the chat. It just looks weird. Anyway, yeah. So I don't know. I've been liking that one. I'm going to play it some more this weekend, obviously. And then there was that other game that came out, Story. What was the name of it? My son grabbed it, and I was going to grab it.
It's got one of those the classic most unmemorable names in the world, like Shrouded or Unshrouded or un.
Oh, Enshrouded, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a word like game. Yeah,
I saw it on Steam. Now I know nothing about it because I won't lie. That name actually did make me immediately glaze over it. I'm like, oh, hey,
yeah. I
kinda
saw
looks
it
cool.
when my kid checked out, and I got the notification because he's had his Steam account since he was like 4, so it goes to my email still. And I was like, oh, what's that? And then somebody was talking. I think it was Jeff was talking about it in the student call on Thursday, and then just talking to Story about it too, and he was actually watching somebody play it. What can you tell everybody a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, so as we've just talked about, it's survival crafting because survival crafting is survival crafting. But the question really becomes, what is the twist? What is the gimmick on survival crafting per each of these games? This one of the twists at least, is destructible terrain. And so as you pick up things like bombs and throw them, you can blow stuff up, and you can then terraform the world. I don't know how well they do that over the long form, but at the start, that's very interesting because it leads to that sort of almost immersive sim level of problem solving. A good example of this is I watched someone play, and there was a building with a locked door, and they're trying to hit the locked door, but they don't have enough resources, and they've used all their bombs, so they can't figure out what to do. But they could climb up around the mountain, dive into a hole in the back of the roof of the building, and then work their way through, get a lockpick, and then open the door, right? So my point is they seem to understand what their game is, and they're leaning into the exploration side of it. Mechanically, though, it plays like all the others, right? You've got magic, you've got normal abilities, you craft, you build, and you sort of go through the usual stat buffs through collecting fruits and meats and whatever. I don't think it's. I haven't played it myself yet, and it looks like it would be fun. I just don't know if it's got staying power relative. I think it'll be interesting, but especially compared to Palworld, which has a more distinct identity, I think it's going to really struggle.
Yeah, like just I have it pulled up on Steam right now, and I'm just looking at it. It looks polished and well done, and it also gives me Skyrim vibes for like some of the more Nordic and kind of cave dwelling dungeon diving elements.
I do like the Nordic aesthetics. Like one thing I really did like is they did have that sort of like Viking-y vibe. And what's cool as well is there was things like you can get people like blacksmiths and put them into your base, and so you're building up your village and town in a way that's kind of compelling. Again, I like games that do that, where you're actually building a space and it's not just make temporary dungeons and bases for like doing other exploring.
Yeah, you get to actually like leave a thumbprint in the world. And the crafting, actually, I'm so curious if actually looking at it, it doesn't look like it did building system necessarily better than Palworld, because I see you're walking with the object and you can't move the object relative to you, which is my biggest gripe of Palworld, which is Fallout 4's build system. All the complaints for it. It feels better to do and actually like build and meticulously place things than I have to physically walk up to move the table. But
I don't think anything can do building worse than Palworld. I'm sorry. Like for all the praise of like the smart mechanics I've given it, there's a lot of issues with it, especially with like I truly believe the Pokemon side of the game is completely almost not there for various reasons. But separately from that, the building sucks. It's not just bad, it's like infuriatingly bad that I almost quit the game level of bad. It doesn't work properly. The mechanics barely function in terms of clipping together. They actively break the AI in places, so you are 100% disincentivized from engaging with the entire building side of the game. If it was me, I would honestly remove half those features until I have them fixed, because it's actually a detriment to the game, in my opinion.
There are quite a few people at Palmon, they'll just walk off into a corner, get stuck, starve to death. But just all of that to say, I think I'd probably stick with Palworld over Enshrouded because, as you mentioned, that unique identity. Even though and this is both a credit and detriment to Palworld, even though the Pal system isn't fully integrated with all the other core gameplay elements, the concept of the system itself is still so fun and like identity inducing that I would probably pick that and choose to voluntarily play and engage with that. As well as like another survival crafter, because there's something fun about throwing balls and having your buddies fight with you.
Yeah, and one of the comments was saying that they're bored of it. They've been playing with a week. 100% understand, because the problem with the game is it's not their late game isn't in the game yet. It is they are not building a Pokemon game with a story and a big elaborate world you explore. The world is there, but the world is there to facilitate gameplay, and that's very clear. They've got regions and biomes and whatever. Their late game is going to be PvP. That's what they want. There's like, you can smell it from the game. Their late game is going to be choosing your party and choosing the abilities for it, and then going on battles with people and then having different bases and things. They're not there. That's not in the game yet. And so if you race through it or get too far into the late game, you will get bored, because the game right now only has the opening portions that are very fleshed out, which is why me and the people I've played with have restarted the opening 20 levels like 4 times, because that's where the fun is. Like once you get to that later portions, it kind of peters out, and it will until they, add all those features in later.
They have some interesting concepts, like with the bosses. I got to play some of the bosses for a bit. I probably want them to be tweaked a little because they're not necessarily difficult. They're DPS checks. You have 10 minutes, and I think the reason they put that timer there is because they know you can kite a boss infinitely and just not die.
Yeah.
Now it's just, okay, we'll like kill it within this time frame. There's ways to probably make that more engaging, to spice it up. I like the actual PAL bosses are usually more interesting than like the human bosses, because the PAL boss is like the there's like a Pen King, which is a giant penguin guy. He actually summons in his little ads, and all of a sudden this becomes a bit of an MMO fight. Doing that in multiplayer and single player is a bit dynamic because, okay, I have to use strategies, I have to run around the room. He will hone in and kill me if I stand still. It's a fun dynamic, and I think they can work on that design. Something
or in my case, out in the wild fighting the Llama King, who's this giant literal ball who like flies into the air and belly flops on your team. That's scary, and you're running around the map just hoping he doesn't get you. Which is so those fights are certainly far more fun.
Yeah, there's better there's mechanical interplay, and kind of to something that the chat had mentioned, it's early access. There's a variance to the degree in what you're willing to forgive and what you're not for an early access game. So for like the build system, definitely improve that. I could tolerate it because the rest of the game's so fun and it's got a good driver and got me into it, but it absolutely cannot stand to have some of these mechanics like a couple updates down the line. So effectively, you're willing to forgive both some glitchiness, a little bit of instability, and some weak design here or there, but the core package is good enough where, okay, this is like worth 20 hours of my time, but improve upon it.
That's also, again, another good point. I just want to say that for me, I bought it for its, like, I know it's on Game Pass, but I just bought it for its set price, which is, again, quite cheap. It's like 20 or 30 relative to other games that are quite large.
Yeah, I was impressed by the pricing.
And I got my money's worth, short and sweet. Even if I never played again, I got enough time out of the money, enough for what I played that I'm not really that worried about further stuff. But I will say, other than that, like, it's not normally my kind of game. And on top of that, it really disappoints me how absolutely lacking anything narrative is. There's no real narrative. It's completely non-existent. There's a couple of lore books that are completely pointless. The actual universe's own logic isn't really there. There's bad guys who are basically bad guys, ... There's not really understood. The whole concept of gyms and dungeons or whatever don't really make sense relative to the world, and why there's just arbitrary 8 towers of various boss fights you could have, or 12. I don't know how many there are, but the fact is the actual lore of the game is entirely non-existent. There is like areas which have dramatic sounding names which make it feel like there's the evil lab or there's the whatever, but there's nothing in the game. It's entirely just flavor text for the sake of flavor text. And so for me, that's a deal breaker for long term. It's not like it's going to be my new game. I'm not going to replace stuff with it. It might be another week or so of interest, and then I'll happily put it away until some new patch or something comes by. But I do think it's here to stay. Some people were saying they'll wait for a year to see what happens. It'll be here. Like this game is like, it's not. It looks like a meme and it looks like a flash in the pan because it's got such attention immediately. But this has enough depth in the mechanics of the combat system and the character creation and whatever that this will have an audience. This game is going to last and it's going to retain, I don't know what percentage, but it's going to retain a decent enough percentage of the audience that it will match other games to that size,
Yep, the hope is just that they take all that inertia and momentum and continue to build into something interesting. I could tell the story is designed as I guess in a way a bit Dark Souls-esque, where there are disconnected random lore bits to hopefully later connect later on. That way it'll look like it's always planned, but it's just very tactically leading in just enough right directions where I can fill in the blanks later. Like I have gyms, I have evil corporations, you washed up on an island, plenty of places to go. Personally, what I really want to see, and what I would even bought into the game if it didn't exist, would be I want to see a civilization continuing with like Palworld's logic. So an actual town or city built with this behavior of, oh yeah, you have just like Pokemon that work jobs, people who work with their Palmon, and the very, very interesting implications of Palballs working on humans and the fact that you can make them work for you. So there's a lot of fun implications for this world to see fleshed out and built out. Some groups are like, no, putting humans in Pal balls is inhumane. Others, I only use human workforces. There's so many interesting dynamics that I want to see fleshed out that I really hope they capitalize and like continue on than just kind of stay in that perpetual survival grunge state. Create an end game that feels notably different.
Yeah. Andrew Powell, you guys been a little quiet on this. Any other thoughts and stuff you want to add on Palworld?
I'll let Paul talk.
I think
they need a lava level.
They definitely do, but as I think someone mentioned in the chat, the PAL is going into fire like now and then when there's lava close by, that wouldn't be fun thing with them. Yeah, I think it's what everything you said, and what I still see it's a lot of early access bugs.
I will be right back. Sorry, got a little leak problem.
Yeah. This is something that I like playing early access games, but it's still an early access game. I'm interested how many people will break from it after a week or two, seeing all the problems that we are seeing right now. Yeah, it's fun, but it starts to get problematic after some time.
Yeah, I think the people who probably have the best longevity are people who are playing on like dedicated servers with friends or like with larger communities.
Yeah,
that's a fun game where you can just rotate in and out and probably take in doses. That's probably the best way to do it if you want to keep like interest and longevity, is come back to it like maybe a couple times a week, 2 times a week, or maybe even once a week, play through it a little bit further, get like a couple new levels. You're doling out the experience to hopefully, and again, the game's long-term success will be impacted by how quickly they can do updates, creating and adding bug fixes and adding that new content. So you can just keep coming back, play for a bit, leave, and then keep doing that on like a server. And that's probably the best way to keep a group of players interested.
I thought the game was okay. I, however, have never played Pokemon. So, you know, and I did. So I played with Story and Uri and technically Weimann, although he wasn't talking to us during it. So I don't know if that was really playing with them, but he was there and it was okay. I had fun playing with them. I would not have enjoyed it by myself because there is no point to it. As far as I could tell, there's no point because there's no story. There's no real like conflict. Like I didn't feel like it was anything. You just walk around and do shit, and that's fine. But even with a game like SimCity, where you're really just doing whatever, there's still like a goal. There's some like stated thing. Yes, you can do anything. You can build Bug Farm or a big metropolis, but there's still like something pushing you. And this one just didn't seem like it. You know, it was just walking around. But at the same time, when I want to veg out, I turn on New World, and New World is mindless. There's no point. I don't read any of the story stuff. I go to the quests, and the quests are like, go over there, pick up that. All right, I do that. Oh, now go over there. How did my character know that the thing was over there? I don't know. It just knows, so I go over there. It's mindless stuff. So if I want a fun game, I don't play New World. I play New World when I want to veg out and not think about anything, you know. But for games, I want there to be more of a story, more of a reason to play. So maybe these games are just not mine, but it was fine. Otherwise, playing with other people is more fun.
You can either have a mechanical drive or a narrative drive. Palworld, as soon as you get your base to like be self-automating, which is like my immediate mechanical drive, where your pals can farm, they can generate resources, you could effectively turn the game off there or leave it running infinitely and your pal's base will be fine. That is something that needs to be improved. Like I enjoyed, I want to like go fight stronger creatures because I'm a masochist. I like running into high level areas and just seeing what happens. So that was a fun hook for me, but otherwise, there should probably be a bigger mechanical incentive to, okay, what's the next stage? Why do I want to go to the next stage other than for the sake of number go up?
Yeah. Certainly.
I got one other thing on just general games. Really looking for more recommendations from you guys in the chat. One of the most recent games that I had a lot of fun with was that Dungeons 4 one, where you're basically like building a dungeon and then you can send your guys out from the dungeon up to the overworld, go attack things, and then build up your dungeon more. And you're like, it's 2 layers where you're like above ground, below ground, and you're expanding out, and then you pop up. So that was a lot of fun. Been having fun with it because it was both funny and I really like RTSs and dungeon building games, and it was a combination of both of those. I'm curious if you guys know of any other things like that, because that came from just me mentioning that I like those kind of games, and then I think it might have been Jeff that recommended that too. Somebody recommended that though. I'm curious if you guys have other recommendations for things like that. I really like those, and like Command and Conquer 0 Hour. If I could find a new updated version of a game like that, where it was, rock, paper, scissors, bunch of different things with team fights where it actually mattered, what your team comp was. That would be fun. I never got into things like this Supreme Commander where everybody's building shitloads of stuff and it's all the same. Those kind of things always drove me nuts, but something fun like that. Hey, you guys got any ideas?
I'm terrible. Palworld was a flash in the pan for the first time I've actually taken the time to play a game. So I've got nothing. My backlog is, ironically, my backlog. I will just emulate PS2 game. Steambot Chronicles still in the top 10 of favorite RPGs. I'll just go back and like play the infinite history of older games. I am not even current to what's happening nowadays.
Oh. Fair enough. EverQuest, yep, there we go. I saw there was a bunch of drama about that because they upgraded to DirectX 11 from DirectX 9 finally. It's only been 20 years or so since DirectX 9 was old. Apparently that broke a bunch of stuff. Playing a lot of Valorant, and it looks like people are playing Enshrouded and stuff too. Cool. What do you guys want to go on to app? Oh, sorry, what's that, Andrew?
Enshrouded looked better than Palworld to me, but it hit my aesthetic. It hit my fancy theme. It looked like there was more dungeon and questing type stuff. So I don't know.
It matches with the kind of game that you're building and the assets that you build, so it kind of makes sense. By the way, I still think I had a random idea. It's probably a terrible one, but I think we should make a game one day together. Just literally one day, like spend a day, make a game, and build something that uses some of your assets to do. Like I have a couple interesting ideas that I think would be fun, and I think we could knock them out in a day if you did the art and character side and we did the code part together.
Cool,
it'd be fun. Like make some fun little games. It was an idea I had last night, and I was gonna message you, and then I fell asleep. Then I got distracted by Magic Arena's cube draft that got re-enabled. Thank you. Then I fell asleep. They do that like every 3 months. They have the cube draft thing, and it's my addiction. Anyway, you guys want to go on to the Apple news?
Yeah, let's do it. Sure.
Everybody excited about what's going on there? I mean, it really only affects 2 of us. Not really the rest, but I mean, really, it probably is going to affect the whole world and what happens with the whole situation there. Anybody feel really confident explaining exactly what happened, or?
I just read it.
I have no idea what happened.
Oh, okay. So, well, I'll give a quick overview, but Apple's getting hit in the EU with the requirement to allow other app stores to exist and to be able to sell their games or sell games and apps through other platforms where Apple's not taking a cut. And they said, okay, we have to do this. And then they came up with a plan that was, just literally, it has to have been designed just to enrage the EU and like to strike back. Like it's very hard to see how it was designed for anything other than that, unless there's just massive wrong reporting on the details, which is always fucking possible. But the things that I saw said that they wanted 50 cents or half a euro per install after the first 1 million installs, which seemed like a lot. I mean, Unity got a lot of shit for like 15 cents or 10 cents or 2. Was it like 2 cents? I forget what the lowest fee was. They wanted 50 euros or half a euro, 0.5. I don't know how you say that. And how do you say that in euros, Story?
Half a euro.
50 cents. 50
50 cents. Okay, I don't know. I don't know if they're like
Apparently, it is a euro cent.
euros.
I didn't even know.
What?
Yep.
Yeah, but then you've got to have like some $1 million bond to be able to set up a store. There was a whole bunch of things. I was watching Carmack tweet about it last night. It's where I got most of my info, was Carmack's tweets and the responses about it, or X's or whatever the hell. But it seems like they came up with a solution where you, instead of paying 30%, you pay like 50 or 60%. Assuming, but of course, it's going to vary on the game and the cost, right?
It feels weirdly like Unity's plan. Why is it aping that?
It's like that, but like scaled way up, only for Europe and only in response to them having to open it up. And I have no idea how this is going to fare there. I assume it's going to be like some big, crazy legal battle.
I would assume that they will be having a court battle with the union lawyers about being a monopoly, and European Union can strike back hard, and I think they will strike back hard against Apple, and we will see what will happen. Yeah.
What do you think they can and would do? I'm curious for both of you stories too, because you guys from there,
monopoly, they can take 10% of entire earnings from Europe, just in matter of half year to a year. They can just make it that if you don't drop them, you will pay us 10% of everything you earned in Europe. They did this, I think, once or twice, where companies started fighting hard against them. And because if they don't see any profit from it, then you will be working on it. They can take Apple and split it into several companies in Europe. They can do that also, because if they treat you as one big company, they can split you up. Some companies also made it some thing like that. Then, for example, they can say App Store has to be split from the entire company. They can, but it depends how strong the European Union wants to affect and fight the Apple. Yeah, and to be truthful, looking that there are several elections in Europe, in USA in next year, then this year, next year, then it can be interesting looking how these battles with big American corporation against EU and all the laws about selling Apple stuff in Europe can be very hard.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, 10% doesn't seem bad. They're fighting off 30% right now, so they might be happy with that, with the fine that they never pay.
That's 10% before taxes, before everything. That's billions of dollars of money that they will be having to pay, and that's not.
I wonder how that weighs with their 30% though. Like what chunk of that?
Remember, that's not only games. That's sales of everything.
Yeah,
all sales. Yeah, so iPads, iPhones, everything. I would say that I think they make more money from selling hardware than software right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and it will be from hardware sales, not from software sales. It will hit the entire company.
Right, but
it's hard to know. Like I think the thing we have to remember with Apple is they're not playing the short game; they're playing the long game. Now you could argue whether their equations are right, but the fact of the matter is, I think what they're aware of is this is precedent setting. This isn't just a solution or a problem. This is a big deal for them, and I can understand why they're doing everything in their power to fight back against it. And I guess the question becomes, it's kind of like with the Steam and Epic stuff a while back, but like I guess what interests me is the percentage of markets, because the one thing that is worth remembering as well is that they make twice as much sales in America than they do in Europe. Or like broadly, Apple. It is. That's not to say that's not a lot of money.
Do you know of Europe of their wholesales? Because they've got Asia and everywhere else. Or if anybody in chat knows, drop it in there. I'm curious. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
I'm not sure. I know. I looked it up a while back. I cannot remember now, but I do know that like it's at least twice as much in terms of sales in Americas than in Europe combined. So I don't know where their mind's at, but I guess my point is they have smart people and a lot of money involved in this, and so they're looking at it more in a case of how is this going to apply in long term, and is it worth them even angering the dragon now to play longer game, to do whatever? Like, I don't know if they're right, but that's could be what they're doing, you know.
Oh, I just checked. It's 10% from the global annual turnover. Global.
Yeah, they're showing
games.
increase
So,
slightly up to 12% from 10.
yeah, but
so it's relatively small.
But European Union can take and make them pay 10% of their global income. Not
of their Europe
Oh,
income?
That's
No.
interesting.
Okay, so that would be
Global.
all of their Europe income then, right? 10% is basically like all their. It's not just 1%. So but I think the precedent part is what stories got, because if this happens there, then it's going to get argued that it should happen here, and then who knows? Like I don't know what the situation's like in China.
The fact of the matter is, I think that we have gotten to monopolistic levels of insanity that we really should start breaking these things up. But that's a whole different question. But I do think they're definitely going to thrash around on this for a while. I definitely don't see them giving up without a lot of fight, because it's like anything. It's like with defending copyrights and things. If you don't do it, then you're setting a precedent that's going to screw you later. And so it's worth their while fighting as much as possible, even if it's like probably a bad idea.
Yeah, but from what I've seen, if European Union wants to fight back, European Union can fight back slowly, methodically, and you will have to beat to the laws, or you will have to get out of Europe.
I wonder how that would go over if they were like, but Apple can't sell stuff here anymore. With the people in Europe just revolt.
That Europe has very many patents about mobile technologies. Lots and lots of patents from back, and they can also use them to fight companies.
I might be a minority voice here on this. I probably am, but so Apple set the 30% precedent years ago with music, and everyone's run with that. All the platforms run with it now. So that's the standard. And I do wonder how much innovation in marketplaces we have now that we wouldn't have if it was 15% as the standard. Someone like Steam, someone like the Epic Game Store, but they make Fortnite money, so there's a difference there, I suppose. But all these markets exist because there's money to be made. And if there's less money to be made, then perhaps some of them would not exist and we would not get what we have. Apple, I like using Apple products.
Right, but that other 15% though would be going to the developers. So there's the argument that the innovation would be happening more on the developers side, and that Apple would just be keeping less of a chunk of it for the shareholders.
Maybe, but also I this is the thing. I don't know if adding that to the developers would get us better games.
No, I don't either. I don't know that it would make a huge difference either way.
And so somebody's getting the money either way, and I don't think it would lower the price of games either. So I think I've got this iPhone. I like this iPhone. How much of this iPhone and the things I like about it are essentially here because Apple was making 30%. And even if it's not the direct money, but just the future value of that they're like, we need to invest in this better app store. We need to invest in this privacy policy or whatever, because we have this money to be made. I just don't know. I really don't know. I just personally like Apple products, and I don't see it directly as a monopoly because I could use an Android phone. I just don't want to. And I also like the privacy that, as much as I don't think any of them really have our full privacy in mind, of all the big companies, I trust Apple more than anyone else when it comes to privacy.
Apple's monopoly status is interesting because of how they handle their software. And I decided to look it up just now. Software makes up about 20% of like their total income. 80% is like products and physical hardware sales. And half of all of that is just the iPhone. So Apple fighting so hard over the App Store is probably good for precedent, but ultimately like very minimal to their bottom line, even if they were to like eat that cost, because it's not a super, super significant portion of their total revenue.
What about profit though? It may not be revenue, but it's got to be really high on the profit margin compared to the hardware.
True, it probably does have a higher profit margin. I'm still like looking at it. I'm looking at just like an Investopedia article for it.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm really curious. Like if they make a good chunk of their actual profit off of that, and if that would, like, what it would do to their bottom line if that was cut. I don't expect that this is going to make any drastic changes soon, because most people aren't going to switch to it. It's going to be, it's the big companies that they're really fighting against right now, like the Netflixes and all the other ones that want to be able to sell their services outside, that are doing many millions of dollars.
Also, I think two parts are important to this. One of them is the concept of monopolies. A common sort of misassociation of the term monopoly is to imply either there is only one, or that it's exclusively the one thing. Generally, when people talk about monopolies, what they mean is it viable for competitors to exist? Because what can happen is there's many ways for a company to be large enough that, well, on paper, it's perfectly viable to have competitors. It is completely infeasible based on market structure and and how things have been placed. So a lot of this more comes down to is like, would it be viable for a new company to start and compete in that space? And you can get into the nitty gritty, but I think realistically, it's very hard for people to compete with Apple in a lot of their verticals. They do own those spaces in a way that's not really a fair comparison. And it comes down to what, like, one of the examples way back with Windows was just Windows offering a browser when you installed it. That was a big issue back in the day, not because you couldn't install other browsers, but because it is an unfair business practice to start most of their users off with an initial competing product for free out the gate with your browser that nothing else can compete in that market space. So it's not just a can someone do it, it's can someone realistically do it and compete fairly in the market. And there's a lot more to that side of it. But the other part I think that's more important to the pricing point, I think something that Netflix and other video platforms and the music industry before that and so on kind of demonstrates. I always go back to sprite art, because I think that's probably the most clear example of this whole pipeline. I've said this before, but back in print days when you used to print newspapers, if you wanted illustrations in your newspaper, how do you get illustrations? If you're not an illustrator, you need to buy illustrations. And so people would have to hire an in-house artist. It's like any industry. Here's a subset of my business I need someone for, and they're expensive. A dedicated person to draw pictures to annotate various topics I'm doing. And so someone came along and would make art books. And art books would be, you'd sell clip art. You would literally have someone write a giant book going, here's 600 images of business people sitting in seats or people waving and various things that are like broadly applicable to whatever kind of illustrations or articles you're doing. And those books used to sell for like between 3 and 10,000 for a book of a couple thousand images. That sounds like a lot, but like that's not for you. That is meant to be for a publishing house to use for their work. And then when people saw that, they're like, well, cool, why don't we do that but cheaper? And so now you had a competitive market. People saw that there's blood in the water, and they kept doing it. And then that we get to when I was growing up, like, clip art is the joke. It's the thing in Windows. It's that little drop down that's like the silly bad art that nobody actually really uses unless you're doing a terrible presentation for something, for like a bake sale or whatever. That art used to cost thousands. But the fact of the matter is, it's that democratization over time when a market gets oversaturated by people and different things. My point with all of this is to say that this happens to everything. This happened. Movie making used to require huge cameras and expensive people. That got smaller and more democratized over and over. And then it's like, okay, cool, you can make stuff, but you can't publish it. No one's going to put it into their theater. Like, said, okay, well, then we have TV. And then TV became, okay, but no one's going to actually end up, producing your work and doing, okay, well, now you have Netflix. And so more and more, this stuff kept happening. And then what that does is it eventually kills the industry. At some point, you end up oversaturating to the point where the costs are shrinking because of the competition and the various different productions. And that's how you get things like Netflix. Well, currently they're back up again, but like it's a precarious industry right now to try to produce TV at the scale and cost at which Netflix was doing it. And all of this is to say, app stores and everything else is no different. There is only a set amount of money with a set amount of, there are people that obviously more people are born, but there's only a set market. It may grow and shrink over time, but there's only a set number of people that can buy your stuff. And there's more money there is, the more people enter and so on, and it keeps happening. So all of this to say, well, I disagree with a lot of the ongoing stuff. Something Andrew said, I think really points out is important, is that if this happens, you want to make sure that you can retain a high price for as long as possible and drag on that earlier portion of the pricing model for these systems as long as you're in control of them. And it's why companies like Meta are aiming to angle to be VR. Not because they actually care right now, but because if VR does become the thing, or AR or whatever someday, and they're the ones holding the reins, they can set the pivot points and prices for perpetuity, for everything they're doing.
It'd be like the Apple of the future.
That's
they
what
want
they
that platform lock-in.
Exactly. They want to be the thing, the de facto answer to that question. And it's very easy to let that stuff slide. And you end up with the problem with like Steam, where as good as Steam is as being the game platform, the fact is they have shrunk the prices of games. They set the numbers. They set the precedent that prices are a certain way. And you have things like Humble Bundle coming in as like, oh, we can disrupt the market. And then they disrupt the market so well that indies are going under because they're making their money out of keys, and then the keys aren't selling that well. And so the point is each one of these things disrupt each other, and eventually they bottom out an industry until it's not profitable to even hire the people to make the stuff, and then nobody makes money. Not the producers, not even the rich people who are like skimming off the top, because there's no money to skim anymore because the prices have gotten so low and the consumption is so low because there's so many options. So yeah, that's not to say I agree with what they're doing, but to Andrew's point, it's understandable why that there's like, if you have expensive people who know this stuff better than you do, who are like watching the markets and watching the trends and understanding the history of this stuff, and they see the numbers that we don't see, some of their decisions might make more sense than us theorizing,
There's only tangentially related, but there is an interesting concept about like peak audience and market saturation, where we have a precedent for infinite growth where there's always going to be more market, more consumers to get, but especially like our top tech companies might end up at a point of saturation where they've generally hit about market cap. There's not a lot more room to grow. It's a matter of expanding and getting better at monetizing your saturation. Those people who you already have as paying customers, getting more money out of them that way, rather than necessarily finding more audiences and more customers, because you might hit that point where you don't have a whole lot more room to grow.
It's interesting. Someone mentioned the chat, the difference between the Androids or the security on Android versus iOS. That's important to me. I know hackers will get in if they really want to, but it's the difference between locking your door and not locking your door. Somebody will get in if they really want to, but locking your door is still a good idea. But even just the user experience for me, as somebody who I don't like building my own computer. I don't want to open up the terminal and do shit there. That just annoys me. I just want to, do what I want to do. And I do fear if there are other app stores on iOS that I'm going to have to download more app stores, figure out which one, log in with that user ID, put my credit card in again, have to go through all this random crap. Like I don't really buy that many games, but when I do, I don't want to have to spend an hour trying to figure out which game is actually good versus which games. Even the iOS store, to be fair, is full of crappy games. So I'm like already barely using it because it's just such a headache to wade through all the crap. So I don't know. I am willing to pay and to, in some ways, have less options in order to have somebody curate my selection so that I don't have to think about it too much.
Oh, well,
you can still do that though, right?
Yeah, like I've said many times that like I want there to be, I think a certain level of walled garden is good. Like you do need some level of like quality assurance and maintenance and stuff. Exactly, yeah, and I think that's important. But I wasn't super in on this topic. I wasn't really aware because I'm not super interested in Apple products broadly. I do have an iPhone for an Apple Watch for work stuff or for whatever, but I don't use them all the time. It wasn't until I watched the MKHD video where they talked in vivid detail about the bubble concept. If you don't know this, the whole chat thing, I think that's probably the best indicator of the complexity of this issue, because there's
Can you explain that real quick, like a high level for everybody who doesn't know what you're talking about? Just the 60 second.
Yeah. Okay. So in most games, when you're communicating with a chat app. And if you're communicating, back in the day, you did send text messages. Text messages suck for various reasons. And then various other apps would try to provide that by using your Wi-Fi connection or similar instead, because it gives you more opportunity, higher bandwidth, blah, blah, blah. There was Viber and a bunch of others, and Google Chat and all the other different solutions. But when you're in a lockdown ecosystem, you can do a lot more fun stuff. And so they have a lot of additional features that are exclusive to Apple communication. And with the Android stuff, they can't buy into that. And things like, some things seem small, like emojis translating and things, but there's also a lot of embedded features that just don't work. And this sounds like a small thing, but the point that Marcus Brownlee did, was kind of highlighted, which I think is the important bit, is this goes back to that monopoly concept and like where you're talking about the competing antitrust stuff. There are standards that exist that transcend this idea that people could choose to follow or not, but whether or not is up to the companies. But the important part is that it's the psychological effect of this, is that if all of your friends are using a particular kind of chat app, which has your messages be a certain color, which has a certain feature set, and you're not in on that, you are actively missing out in like the communications, media messages, the interactions. You are getting a fundamentally different experience in the same community if everyone in that little set is using a different tool than you. And so, like, you could argue it's like, well, sure, they can just buy this or that. Yes, but in a world where you're all engaging in a communication and you're using group chats and channels, if there is like an understanding that there's a certain set that is being used around that, you will be ostracized out of it. Everyone knows this is the classic thing for kids in school, is that if all of your friends do X and you're not, it's not important broadly, but it is important socially, which can be a real thing at a certain age and certain whatever. And so the point is, this simple sounding argument of just the idea that these bubbles is like, oh, that's it's a color change. It's actually a very important social issue relative to certain people in certain ecosystems and certain, again, certain tech areas are very Apple heavy. And so you've got an entire, I could go on this rant for ages, but it's like the old days about smoke breaks. Legitimately, decisions were made in smoke breaks. People who would smoke would go out together. And if the boss smoked and you did too, and you were standing outside talking to the boss, you would have more meetings with them, more social engagements, and you would be picked more for meetings, and your entire career trajectory would change. Like, it's, you can't look down on these like micro social interactions which vastly change entire industries and careers. And the point
is, smoking is good for you.
Yeah,
it's good for your career. Let's add that asterisk.
Yeah, and so the point is that in this way, Apple have actually a surprising hidden micro monopoly on the way people communicate in certain areas and fields. And that's,
I think it's not very hidden though. I think people that's the argument in court, right? Is that they're using that and other similar things to keep a monopoly and to make it so that nobody else could get in there and compete, because they could easily open up those APIs and Android devices, or somebody making a new phone system that's not, one of the 5 biggest companies in the world could integrate with all this.
They've actively killed Android apps which manage to support those features.
Yeah,
like there's literally multiple apps which have genuinely managed to replicate the features. In one case, by having dedicated Apple devices on servers that they would route to replicate the feature set. And again, Apple do what they can to kill it. And so, yeah, it is a very interesting topic. Like, there's a lot more to this, and I think it's more than just personal preference. I think you have to really get into the idea of like, what is the societal effects of this, and how much control do they have over the way people see branding, what they do, how they engage, and like the consumer buy-in is a very big deal, I think, because Apple friends tend to hang out with Apple friends, and you'll lean into what people are doing. Like, everybody tends to vaguely like to associate with the same stuff and buy the same things because it makes things easier to work with. And to Andrew's point, a lot of people talk about Apple, they talk about convenience. They talk about the fact that, yeah, but it all just works together. Of course, I mean, if I have an iPhone, I might as well get an Apple Watch, right? Because it works together so well. And if I have that, if I'm going to get a laptop, I have to get an Apple one anyway. So, and then if my friend has one, we can just share. So like, the excuses stack up, and where they're playing the long game with you, that it's not just mild personal preference. It's they're actively gating. Like, the argument shouldn't be this stuff all works so well together, but why does it not work with anything else? Why is it actively decided to be that it only works well with itself? Because it's not that hard to make this stuff support other features. It's more a question of that they actively choose to make it hostile in that direction,
Sometimes Apple's stuff is really hard to use, though. Like, I always use it's easier now, but for many years I was always pissed off, and I wrote letters to Tim Cook about how hard it was to freaking just export a photo as a JPEG from the Photos app, because they just
didn't. Did he reply?
No, I have.
Tim, you've been called out here by Andrew. Now you never got back.
I got replies from, when you email Tim Cook, you'll get replies often from their executive support, and that can get some. So if you're having issues. I did get a reply from their chief financial officer about how they were using Ireland to not pay taxes, and he gave me some long-winded.
We used to be a pretty great tax haven, not anymore.
Yeah, and he gave me this big thing about how they pay all taxes that they're owed, and I was like, "You're purposely missing the point." But hey, I got an email from the CFO, so that was something. But yeah,
it's interesting. Real quick. Can everybody who's with us live please hit the thumbs up button if you haven't hit it yet? And Story, when did they get rid of Ireland as a tax haven? I thought that software companies were still basing themselves out of there to not pay taxes.
I mean, there are still some. I'll never forget because it really stuck with me. Was one stage in a company I worked for, they were talking about whether they were going to give a certain like long form contract to different subdivisions of the company, and they kind of threw out almost. I think they forgot they said it, but they basically called Ireland Bangalore 2, as in the second Bangalore as the tax. So like the subtext was always there. Is like it's the kind of the B and C send stuff too. There was a lot of whatever. I don't know how it stands now entirely. I just know that there's not as many tech companies here job-wise. Like it used to be.
Oh.
I mean, if you want to go all the way back to the shipyard days, Ireland used to be the largest exporter of software in the world. That was a point that was true. That's like long gone now. But like, so Ireland's workforce used to be known as a tech workforce, and now it's mostly just used as a place you put a small office somewhere so you can do your taxes.
Was it largely like changes in laws or just like the world changing around it?
There's a lot. Like, again, Irish history has its own boring stuff, and I know how much I hate American history, so I won't bore everybody else. But I will just say generally that like Ireland has a large history of migration. Like as a country, it was very much about going out for bigger and better things and moving on to different places. And so it was never, Ireland had a really good job of training its tech workforce. And at the start, there were companies that were here. But if you work in an office in a local Irish, like small portion of a company, if you're good at your job, you will be shipped to the UK or the American office at some point, right? And so basically there was doing so much export of training, it started to become a cost benefit analysis of why are we training all of these high quality IT people to leave our country and then not really invest in taxes and stuff. So there's a lot to it, but it's like everything else, right? It's the same stories.
Okay, interesting. Just curious about that. I said something I'd heard about millions of times. Talk to a tech company and they're based in Ireland or on some other island in the Caribbean or something. It's always like they're out of Bermuda or something.
Well, I'm based in California. I'm doing it all wrong.
Oh yeah,
so much in taxes.
Well, at first you have to have somebody who's very expensive and understands all the tax crap to be able to do that stuff. I'm sure it's, you're in the millions of dollars before you're even thinking about that kind of stuff. You got to pay somebody. Real quick before we continue on, I wanted to mention the Unity award sale. I forgot that was going on. And Andrew, Powell, you guys have anything in this sale right now?
As said last week, you all didn't vote for me.
Everybody has to get ready to vote next time for some Nature Manufacture and Infinity PBR assets and get some of those in there. But they've got a bunch of stuff 50% off still from the past winners, which some of them are some of my favorites, like the text animator. Really love that thing. It's one of the few things that I pull into almost every project. Almost any project with text. When I get to the point of doing polish and making that look pretty, it's a lot of fun. Oh, I lost the chat window.
No.
So you guys got more thoughts on this Apple Monopoly stuff?
No, at the moment. Has anyone I'm assuming nobody's tried out Vision Pro yet?
No.
No.
I do think it's going to lead to a lot of new development in AR and VR stuff. And I think it's probably going to lead to a lot of investment in startups popping up in the next couple months. I think it's definitely something interesting to get into. If I had any project to work on at all with it, I would probably consider grabbing one. I just don't have an actual use case for one. But yeah, if I had a job to do with one or something, I would jump all over it because I think it's going to be interesting and it's got a small chance to do to really kind of like hype up the AR VR industry. I think it might also really help Facebook and Meta too in the short term. When people start to see it and they start to see maybe I can't afford the expensive one, I'll get the Vision Pro, or maybe the people who get the Apple one and then want to see the other stuff if they're getting into it. Getting a Vision or an Oculus is pretty damn cheap in comparison.
One thing I do want to just mention on that though is because I hear a lot of the comments around niche product, niche market, too expensive, no one will buy it, etc., etc. The short answer is yes, and they know that. And they don't care, and that's not the point. This product is not to be sold. I'll repeat that again. It's a weird sentence.
But it's sold out, right?
It's sold out, but it's sold out to a very specific kind of person who will always buy whatever it is. which is there's a whole curve on how this stuff works with early adopters and how the technology stack goes and how people would engage with it. And there's like you can look up, this is every product, every new tech investment of any kind follows this exact same structure. And so the point is, this is not mass consumers. It wasn't, it's not going to be. They're playing a long game specifically around public consciousness and identity. And there's so many products which were stupid at the gate. Things like smartwatches or tablets. The original tablets were considered stupid products. Rightfully so, I would say, because at the time it was like, I have a phone in my pocket. Why would I want a phone that's bigger than my phone but smaller than a laptop, has less features than my laptop, harder to carry around? What is this for? This is legitimately a really dumb product. It has no market. So what did they do? They made a market. And they made a market very slowly over time by setting expectations, making it a luxury product, setting an expectation that rich people have them, then surprising everyone. But now there's a cheaper one. Wow, I can't afford the rich one, but everyone has seen all the cool people have one. Well, now I can get the cheaper. And suddenly a market like grows organically out of that, right? So don't look at this product as a thing they want you to buy. They don't. They want you to look at it and go, damn, that's expensive.
I wish I could buy it.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that.
a rich people thing.
Exactly.
I wish I
That's
could
all
have
they
it one
want.
day.
But
So
the
just
quality
make it
is
work.
so nice. They do such a good job with the quality. And so a lot of people have tried VR with the Quest, and more will, especially the young kids, right? The kids have all tried the Quests, and I know an 8-year-old who is completely native in the Quest at this point.
Yep, I know a few.
Yeah, and so that is, 4 years from now, whenever the Apple Vision comes out, not the Pro, just the Apple Vision comes out, that will be the market that all these kids want, because it's going to be the slightly more expensive than the Quest, but better quality, and it will have the blue bubble. And I'm sure Apple is learning a lot of new tricks from this, and they're going to come out with a lot of new things and figure out what the real killer apps are for this stuff. And
you also have to look at like brand identity in terms of markets. And so again, people forget Mac used to be the gaming platform. Like it was the competitive gaming platform, but like that. And at the time, it was a surprise. It was like, oh, this is like, it's like Windows, but you can do gaming, and it was more powerful. And that was their sales pitch for a long time, that it was the more powerful gaming oriented machine. But then they pivoted into branding themselves as, well, we're for creatives and professionals. We're the machines that only the people doing real professional work use. And it's all of this stuff pivots. And so you have to look at it in the grand scheme of the meta game they're playing. They're also getting back into gaming again. Like it's subtle. They're just kind of touching on it over here with stuff, but they're doing gaming again. They've got this headset. The headset won't be good for gaming based on the way it works. And it has support for Unity and stuff, but it's not really about gaming for multitudes of reasons. But it's where are they heading? What are all these little decisions doing? And where are they going? Where's the market going? What's the new tech on the horizon? How are people going to lean in that direction? So I don't doubt it. Like, I have a feeling we're going to have a cheaper Apple gaming focused headset some point in the future. I just don't know how many years it'll take to get to that point. And I think they're hedging their bets, is that they like to be the most professional thing in a field. And so now they have the fanciest headset, the gold standard one. It's not actually very good for what most people would actually use VR for, because it's not good for gaming. It's going to be heavy. It's got the wired. It's not, all of the actual use cases for it don't fit right now, but they don't care. They're just setting that precedent that we're in the space, we make the best ones. And then separate from that, we're getting back into gaming, and we'll revisit the interconnection later and sort of make it the mass product thing. So I think it'll be an interesting space. I'm curious to see what happens. And my own personal thing, separate from all of that, is when you've been doing VR for 10 years or whatever, it's kind of hard to get as excited about it, because all of this stuff is cyclical, and I've watched this exact cycle happen at least 5 times. I've watched the releases of the Gear VR and the promises made and what it was meant to do, and how it pivoted the market and its competition with other stuff, and the Oculus Go, which disappeared, that nobody really remembers, like all the other little stuff. And it's fascinating to watch, because it's new to people who are not in the space. But like every one of these like hyper niche tech products, if you're in it early, you can start to see these like microcycles before it reaches the public cycles,
Yeah, I think the main thing that sets this one apart, that, like you said earlier, is that Apple already does hardware and does this as a regular thing, unlike all the other ones that have come out before this. When Oculus first came out, brand new company, no market, nothing. Facebook, they had zero hardware stuff. They'd like tried a failed phone, I think, before, and that was about it. Although I think their phone is actually popular in other countries, just not in the US. Like I heard it was like popular in a bunch of smaller developing countries because they give them away and then hook you in through Facebook or something. I don't know. I just remember seeing a bunch of things about that before. But I think with Apple, like you said, they've got it's not gonna just die off and go away like Google Glass. Apple's not a build things, release them, and kill off products like Google or I forget which one it was. Google just killed something else last week. I think it was the podcast thing. And I can't think. I'm sure Apple has killed off some small sub products, but I can't think of like a big thing that they've done that was like a core thing that they killed off and didn't just replace with some parallel. Yeah. So I think it's going to be big. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for anybody who's looking to get into industrial stuff or industry like game dev related stuff with AR and VR. I think there's going to be a lot more investment in that in the next year, probably than a lot of the other opportunities that are popping up. I've seen a lot of the stuff on layoffs too, but I will talk about that a different day. I don't want to get into depressing stuff.
There was a quote. I can't remember exactly who at Apple said it, but it was one of those ones that I really liked. It was kind of, it highlighted their entire philosophy in like better than anything else they've ever said, which was there's long running complaints about calculator apps on Apple devices and the fact that they don't really have their I think it was on the tablet specifically. They don't have like a fancy tablet version of a calculator app. And they were like asked, well, why not? It'd be very easy for you to make. It's not a hard application. And they responded with something along the lines of, why would we? What could we do to innovate or change that space? And so the answer is, we don't want to give you products you would use or that would be valuable to you. We want to be the best and innovate and make a better version of whatever it is. And if we can't do that, we're not going to bother. Even if you want it, even if it's helpful to you, we're only going to make it if we can somehow subvert and improve and whatever. And so that is kind of the summary of why a lot of Apple stuff is the way it is, because their entire philosophy is around, unless we can steal it and make it the best, like be the ultimate industry locked in version of that, we're not going to invest any resources in it. And so that's why their entire identity is around that. It's like, oh, VR exists, well, we're just going to make the best one. We're going to be the one that people look at that's the best. That's all they care about.
That's why you will never find Infinity PBR making a forest package, because there already exists really good forest packages out there. And that's actually why I didn't make any in medieval environments for a long, long time, because there were better environments. And when manufacturer K4 didn't update their package, I was like, okay, fine, I'll make my own. I wasn't happy about it. I just wanted to use somebody else's. Same with the humans. I wouldn't have made humans if somebody had made a better human, because all I wanted was to use it, but since nobody made it, I won't compete with something that just, why would I compete with something that's really good already?
Just like nobody should make a dragon because there's already dragons out there. Yeah. By the way, that's one of the characters I wanted to use when we make a game. I've been playing with your dragons a lot, and that was the inspiration.
Best dragon on the score.
Just one of the comments too about saying Apple are low quality product, whatever. To be clear, they really are not. A good example of this is the biometric tracking space. If you're into actually getting analytics about yourself, it may look like the most bougie consumer product in the world, but there are people who do full-on analysis on each different one of these tracking devices, how it keeps in range and compares them. There's a really great YouTube channel. I think it's like the Quantified Researcher, the Quantified Scientist. I can't remember the exact thing. He tracks every aspect of his breathing, his exercise, his sleep, his blood pressure, all of this stuff, and he tracks it with every consumer-grade purchasable tracking solution, and pretty much across the board, the Apple Watch is the best for a lot of these different tracking solutions, even to more expensive, dedicated third-party solutions. So it's not just random crap. Legitimately, there's areas they absolutely excel at. And sure, some of it's because they bought the company and put the tech in it, or some of it's because they, stole the tech from other people. Like, it happens. Yes, they do that stuff as well. But the fact of the matter is, it's not bad stuff. They're actually really good at a lot of the things that they work on. But that's not my problem with them. My problem with them is all of the walled garden, the issues with various different things. And personally, I just hate all the swiping crap. It's really annoying. I just think that UI philosophy is very irritating to me on a separate level. But
also, I love modifying my stuff. I'm not the most secure, but I love doing it. I like having my games that I legally purchased on my phone, and I like modifying my phone. So Apple makes that very difficult. I love doing it though.
Yep.
And I just hate that grid-based thing. I think they absolutely ruined mobile phones, like from a user experience perspective, because they set the precedent that everything's a grid of icons, and everything became a grid of icons. Back in the day, you had Sony Ericsson phones with cool, swishy 3D UIs. Was it practical? No, but they had actual design. There's a great YouTube channel where they talk about it, where when phones were fun, phones used to be fun. They used to be legitimately new tech, new designs, new UI. It was interesting. Now everything's a black rectangle with a grid of icons.
That's the one thing I loved about that Windows phone. I know you had one for a while too, right, Story?
Yeah.
The interactive tiles, it felt like such a better experience than my iPhone and my Android one. I would just look at it and I could see everything like without having to flip through anything. I miss it. Before we end up going, I wanted to point out Jason Story's Discord server. Everybody can go check that out. Just sign up on Ko-fi and hop in there. Any interesting discussions this week?
A lot of Palworld talk.
A lot of Palworld talk. Yeah. I can imagine. There's always fun chat though. Always interesting stuff on there. So I highly recommend you sign up, go join, and even if you don't want to talk, just lurk and kind of watch. And then Andrew just sent me a awesome link. You want to tell everybody what this link is once I pop it up on my screen?
Yeah. InfinityPBR.com is just my website. And I chose that because I was about to put the Discord link. I was like, you should join the Discord. But also, there's a link to YouTube, and you should watch my YouTube. I'm going to stream from time to time. I've been doing more streams this past week. And also, there's a link to the Asset Store, which is a wonderful affiliate link. And also, a link to my scripting docs. I think a lot of people don't realize that I spent a lot of time on scripting docs, in that while Infinity PBR has dragons and other cool things, it has a lot of tools too. And that's probably more valuable than a dragon, in my opinion.
Nothing's more valuable than dragons.
Well, you need the dragon, but then you need scripting docs to make the game.
The mimics are really cool too, though. Those were another thing that we're gonna have to use. Yeah, go check out Andrew's stuff if you haven't already. It's freaking awesome. I've been using your stuff since long before I met you. Ever since I started with Unity, I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Gotta use these things. Dragon was one of the first things I bought.
And all of it is mobile friendly. I have to remind people, for every month, at least once a month, I get somebody who says, oh, I'm making a mobile game, I can't use your stuff. And I'm like, my stuff was used in my 2015 mobile game, The Barbarian, which doesn't exist anymore. But if it worked in 2015 on mobile in a poorly designed Unity script,
it was super optimized, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely optimized. It didn't crash too much, and it worked then. So it works 9 years later. So high fidelity stuff can work in mobile. Don't think that you need to only buy Cinti stuff for mobile, although you can if you want.
Yeah, hardware has gotten drastically better since the early mobile devices, and we used to use Cinti stuff back then. Now you can do some crazy stuff. There's also, I just noticed when I was up here, a new publisher of the week sale. I was thinking it was the farm assets, but it looks like now it's a new monster pack. So I'm gonna have to grab this and check it out. I don't think I've seen these monsters, but given the Palworld theme of the week, it totally fits.
I've legit used not 4, but I've used one of their other packs for something else. I think because they've got multiple monster packs. I've used them for projects in the past. They're pretty good.
Yeah, oh yeah, they've got a whole bunch of them. So they're all half off, and you can get, what is it, 4 monster pack 4 for free. Jeez, and it's normally expensive. That's interesting. That's a new one. Usually the freebies aren't something so expensive. That's a big deal. The farming asset's gone. It was last week, so it looks like it changed out already. Oh yes, before we go, one other thing. Johnny is going to be live soon, and if I can find the button, I will set up a way to switch directly over to his stream. But he's doing a new podcast on high performance stuff in Unity and dots specifically. Highly recommend you check it out. There should be a link in the description, but I'm gonna dig one up too and try to add it real quick. Anybody got any other things you want to mention or bring up before we go this week?
Nothing in the pipeline right now.
Yeah,
what was that?
Only one thing for me. Yeah.
Goodbye. You disappeared, pal.
Yeah, I disappeared because to showcase.
Oh, he wanted to show you something.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering why the camera was moving.
They just got rid of him.
No, I'm still here. Yes.
Well, let's make you big.
Wrong camera. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah. So it's coming up. We think up to 4 weeks. If you want more images or some more info, it's on our Discord.
And this is the lava. Is it 2023 or 2024? What's it called?
It's not lava. This is new pack. This will be.
Oh, this is the new one.
Castles and dungeons. Yeah, this is a new pack. It's using lava, as many of our packs using the other packs. It's new pack that we worked on almost 2.5 years right now. And it's not only outside. You can go inside of many buildings.
Yeah, can you get up close on some of those too so you can see the detail? And oh yeah, it looks nice.
So I
that's cool.
can move.
And this is one of the demo scenes there?
Yeah, this is the main demo scene.
It looks really cool. I like the lighting.
Love the architecture and everything. It looks awesome.
I just genuine side question. Do you do your own in-house level design stuff, or is that something you hire out for? Or?
But is the main designer for everything. He designs and levels and everything. Yeah, but our 3D artists work with him. So he's designing most of the things, and they are designing some buildings and stuff like that he then puts together.
Just because one of those things that I really can't stress enough. It's it's not the same skill set. There are people who can make character models who can't make environments, people who can make environments who can't design levels. And so it's actually quite rare to see things because there are some good looking assets, but their demo scenes are garbage. So it's rare to see things that actually have like this is consistent. It's an interesting space. Yeah. I'm noticing some of the use of, some of the angles and things are this is a compelling level design as well as being the assets,
Not just a bunch of split up areas that there's no way to get in between. Yeah, this is cool.
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, that one of the big things with my medieval environment pack is I'm not a level designer. That's clear, right? I made assets that you could make any sort of huge town or small village with, but I did end up paying someone to make the main demo scene because I couldn't make levels. I'm not good at that. And it's really hard, but people need to see, users who are buying it need to see that because most of us aren't good. And I think that's part of the reason why Nature Manufacture stuff is so good is that you can just use their demo scenes as your...
And they are used a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's what I do. Every single one of my games starts out as a Nature Manufacturer demo scene or used to start as a Manufacturer K4. By the way, you guys need to merge so you can be Nature Manufacturer K4. And I think you're in the same country already. So it kind of works out. But yeah, that's the biggest selling point. I mean, maybe not the biggest, maybe this 49% of the selling point is this demo scene can be used right away. Then you don't need to do anything. Just start making your game.
Yeah, I will showcase one last thing to give everyone, because it's not only castle environment. Let me just fly. Oh, and you can walk the entire map from the castle up to this point, just jumping on the rocks. The rocks are the place that you can jump on them, and you can get somewhere like here.
And try to jump all the way across.
Yeah.
Neat.
A little attention to detail too for the whole map being walkable when you would only have to do the castle, but
you see
props.
Yeah. There's few places where you can just jump over the lava river and go further.
Hey, no dog.
So yeah, it took.
Sorry, I had a dog just jump up and follow for trying to get it some food.
Yeah, it took quite a lot of work to do it.
That is definitely a pretty sweet setup. So that one, when is that available? What's it called, and where can people get it?
We are planning to release it in the next 4 weeks. As always, testing. We are at the phase of testing, checking everything, making light several times a day to check if everything works. And it will be most probably called Modular Castle and Dungeon, but we are still checking the different names that we should use.
Hi, it looks freaking amazing. So I just linked it in chat for everybody to go check out. And I also just set up a redirect to Johnny's stream. So everybody should get pushed over to there as soon as we're done. For anybody who has not already subscribed to Corvallis's channel, PowerCore 2000, you should definitely do that. There should be a link in the description. You got anything new coming up?
Not immediately because school started and I'm highly sleep deprived this Friday, but hopefully soon. I do have that AI NPC series I'm working on. Another fun one too, which is a virtual production comparison for Unity and Unreal. That's in the scripting filming phase. That is an adorable dog, and I've forgotten.
Yeah, she was trying to eat a burger over there, about to knock more stuff down.
Yeah, just stay tuned. I hope to have something out maybe by the end of the month. I am absolutely not holding myself to that, but we'll see. The goal is to produce more content.
All right. Well, I'm sure people will enjoy it. If you haven't checked it out, you should go see his stuff. It's some really, really good stuff. He's got some pretty advanced topics and I think some really interesting and well edited stuff. Just need some prettier thumbnails. You got to get some AI generated thumbnails and your views would probably skyrocket.
My thumbnail game is weak. We're working on it.
Your video editing and the quality, it's drastically higher than the thumbnail quality. I think that people are, or if they haven't seen them yet, they're definitely missing out. So go check them out, go subscribe. And then I wanted to last time plug the multiplayer mastery course. If you want to make multiplayer games, the stats and combat lessons are coming up this weekend. We've got inventory, equipment, and all that stuff. There's also a full racing game set up in there too. Right now we're going into the dedicated server RPG stuff, which is almost done. We'll be wrapping up in the next couple weeks. So if you want to join before the sale ends and all the live calls are over and all that stuff, make sure to join relatively soon. Other than that, I think I'm out of things to share. Other than don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll be back next week. Anybody got any other final words?
Have a good week. To everyone watching. I like the stream.
I think we'll have to outro with the amazing GameDevShow song. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Don't forget to go watch Johnny in just a little bit. I think he's live either now or in an hour. It's going to redirect over to there.
In an hour.
Okay. So go check him out in 1 hour or just let it sit there and wait. And then we will see everybody again next week. All right. Bye.
Every week on this joyful day, we gather around and we all say, it's time for the Game Dev Show, my friends, where the laughter never ends. With humor and wit, we share our tales of pixel art and coding fails. From bullet trees to funky sprites, we'll make you laugh with all our might. Join the GameDev Jamboree, where creativity runs wild and free. From early builds to final release, we'll have you laughing like a feisty beast. So come on down, don't be shy. Grab a seat and enjoy the ride. The GameDev Jamboree is the place to